In this video, I'm going to show you how you can build an OCR, an optical character recognition program, using Workflow. So the image shows a high-level overview of how we're going to take an input from either the camera or the photo gallery, use cognitive services to process that image, and then send the output to Notes. Now, in terms of prerequisites, you will need an Azure account, and specifically we're going to be creating the computer vision resource. So I won't show that in this video. The block has steps on how to accomplish that, but essentially the key thing that we'll need is the API key from that computer vision resource, which will preferably be in a text editor on the iOS device that you have Workflow, so that we can copy and paste it later on to update the steps. So once you're in Workflow, we're going to click on or tap on Create Workflow. You can tap on the Settings cog to rename this to OCR. Tap Done again. And then we'll head over to Actions. So the bottom left, you'll tap on Actions. And this is a list of things that we can bring over to our workflow. Now, the initial step that we want is a menu to provide users a prompt on how they want to bring in an image. And in this instance, we're going to provide three choices. So the first one will be take photos, so that will be with the actual camera. The second option will be get latest photos, so that may be the latest photo that you've just recently taken that happens to be in your gallery. And then the last option that we're going to present is select photos. So maybe it's not the latest photo that you have in your gallery, but there is one there. So in this instance, we want to have that option so that users can actually select a specific photo to process. Now, within each of these options, we need to now drag in steps to execute. So the first one will be that take photo to match up with that option. So if users select the take photo option, it will execute the take photo action. Similarly, in the get latest photo option, we want to bring in the get latest photo action. And finally, in the third step, we want to provide users the options to select the photos. So we'll search for the select photos action, and we'll leave the multiple photos toggle off, because we only want to bring in one image. Now, no matter which option the user selects, the output of either of these options will be an image. So before we can send it over to cognitive services, we actually need to we want to edit the image initially to crop it down to just the text. So this step is the edit image step, and we'll specifically automate it to go straight to crop. And then once we have the image, we want to convert it into a JPEG before we send it off via a HTTP call to cognitive services. Now, we don't need to preserve the metadata, so we can uncheck that toggle because we just want to send the image. So this nothing step is just purely just semantics in terms of, because in the next stage we're going to be storing our variable for our API key, and we're just kind of logically separating this from the rest of the flow. So to store the API key, we need a slab of text. So for now, I'll just put a placeholder there, but this is where you'll end up pasting your computer vision API key from Azure. Now, after the text, we want to store that as a variable and give that variable a name. So within Workflow, there's an action called set variable, and we'll call this variable API key. So now that we have our API key in a variable, the next step is the URL. So this is the endpoint for the computer vision API. Now, for now, I'll leave it back blank and come back to this bit later, but that's where you'll need to put your HTTP endpoint for computer vision. So once the URL, assuming that it's populated, the next step will be to get the contents from this URL. So Workflow is going to crawl what we have there, and then we want to construct I guess the headers and our body for the post request. So we've set the method to a post. In terms of the body, we'll be including an image, which will be in the form of a file. The actual image, we're going to be using the magic variable concept in Workflow and selecting the output of the converted image. And then finally, we need to set our headers. So the actual documentation for the computer vision API stipulates what type of headers that you require for certain types of posts. But in this instance, I already know, so I'm just going to type them straight in. So there's just two headers. One is the one for the subscription key, so it's called OCP-APIM-subscription-key. And since we have the variable beforehand, the value for this header is simply the API key. So we just need that variable there, and if that variable was to change, we don't need to change this particular step because it's just referencing the variable. The second header is just the content type, and as we're including an image, we're going to set the content type to application/octet-stream. The blog post again has all these in the details and the step by step if you need to go back and refer. Okay, so now that we have our content, we need to do something with the result of this. Now we know in this instance we're calling an API, so the result's going to be JSON, and we're going to convert that into a dictionary, or a Workflow's concept of a dictionary. And this is where we're starting to parse the JSON. So if you understand what type of output and the way that it's structured, you can use Workflow to parse JSON responses. In this instance, I know that there will be a value or a key called regions within this JSON response. And using this repeat with each step, we can loop through each region and then perform a subsequent action. And we'll continue to repeat this as we're kind of working our way through the nested JSON response. So within each region, we will have each line. And then again, we'll need to repeat for each line to process the inner arrays. So we'll go ahead and get another get dictionary value object. Drag and drop that step. So we said within each regions, within each lines, and now we're going to say within each words. Then eventually we'll get the last step, which is to get each text. Now you may be wondering, how do we know how to construct this kind of nested if statement and extracting certain values? Again, I've already kind of worked out beforehand how that JSON is going to be responded. So if you actually use VS Code or Postman to inspect the response from this particular API, the JSON is structured in such a way that this is what's required within Workflow in order to parse it. Obviously, other APIs may require different ways of parsing depending on how the response is structured. So now that we have all our loops and going through all the different keys, now we want to start combining the output of all of those. So there is a step called combine text. So for each word, I'm going to combine the text and add a space between each one, and then for the subsequent lines and regions, we're going to again combine text, but in those instances, we're going to add a new line separator. And then finally, once we have all our output, the last step that we want in our workflow is the open in option. But rather than just providing the menu, I want to specifically choose the Notes app so that once we have our text extracted from the JSON, we want to store that in Notes. Now I'll fast forward the video and I've updated my API key in that placeholder text as well as the endpoint. And that's it, you're good to go. So once you've got that in there, you can hit the play button and in this instance I've chosen take a photo. You can see it's now moving on to the crop step. Now that I've cropped the image, it's going to send that as a HTTP call to cognitive services, and then we have the end result.